6:02. City Clerk Ed Norris, would you call the roll?
Marian McClellan.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Burns.
Here.
Councilmember Radner.
Here.
Councilmember Edgar.
Here.
And Councilmember Whitehead.
Here.
Okay, we have everyone here and we have a quorum. And the purpose of the special meeting is a marijuana presentation. City Manager Tungate, would you like to preface it or turn it directly over to Director Maroney?
If you don't mind, I'll turn it over to Colton, but I'd like to say a couple things first. First, council members, I want to thank you for your patience. You requested that we research this issue and get back to you some time ago. Obviously, the pandemic slowed that process down. I also want to take this opportunity to thank Colton and Kim for their hard work in researching all this. This was a ton of work and gathering of information. Colton, as many of you know, Colton has accepted a new role in the city. This was quite a while ago now, actually, but he is our planner and our economic development specialist. He is going to be engaging with us and doing a presentation. There's going to be a lot of information coming at you tonight. We did not go into tonight, just so you know, expecting you to make a decision. What we wanted to do was go into tonight and provide you with as much information and background as we possibly could. So without further ado, Colton, if you could take it away, that would be great.
Sure. I believe I need access to share my screen. I don't think I have that. No, I don't. Not yet.
We got Lisa to.
Oh, I'll turn it right over to you. Just a minute.
Okay, perfect. Okay, can everybody see that?
Right.
Great. Okay. Well, good evening, everybody. Good evening, Mayor, members of Council, City Manager. As City Manager Tungate said, this is going to be a lot of information. I would ask everybody to please hold questions until the end. There's going to be a lot of information here, and I just don't want to get sidetracked at all. But so let me just dive in here. So at the direction of City Manager Tungate, my boss, Kim Maroney, Director of Economic Development, and myself did like over a couple months of research on recreational marijuana. So, and this is sort of the culmination of that. And it is a starting point for decisions to be made in the future. So why are we here? Well, right now, let me back up to 2018. Everybody knows Michigan passed this recreational marijuana proposal in 2018. It was Prop 1. Passed in Michigan at 55.9%, passed in Oak Park at 68.5%. We took an opt-out approach early on, took a wait and see approach, which I do believe was the right thing to do. We wanted to wait and see what would happen. In the time between 2018 and now, several surrounding cities have opted in various capacities. And as a reminder, it is still, recreational marijuana is still federally illegal. So what did our research look like? Well, the goal of our research was to provide comprehensive and unbiased information to City Council, to you all, to staff members, to everybody in this process to aid in decision-making. So the research that we conducted was to look at pros and cons of opting in. We looked at a Southeast Michigan policy study done by SEMCOG. We looked at lessons learned from other states. We talked to public officials of nearby municipalities that have opted in various capacities. And then we ended our research with having discussions with our own public safety department and city attorneys. So looking at that Southeast Michigan policy study, this was a big study. We just pulled a couple things out of there that we thought were really pertinent to the conversation that we're having tonight. So some of the top concerns that people expressed in this the survey that was included in this study. Top concerns: underage access to marijuana, impaired driving, exposure to children, and crime were the top concerns. Another thing of interest was actions local leaders should consider in this process. A big thing here is doing community engagement, essentially. Community conversations, doing surveys, gathering feedback from residents and community members. Another thing, collaborating with local neighbors. And of course, consulting with city attorneys to avoid lawsuits. Very, very important. Wanted to throw in this map as well for some context. So you probably can't read the text there, but the lower right map that you see, that is from 2012. It's, again, hard to see, but at that point, it looks like only Washington and Colorado had both medical and recreational marijuana legalized. All those purple states had nothing, no medical, no recreational. And fast forward to 2018, if you look at the bigger map, actually, this doesn't include Michigan, which is now legalized, but you can see the progress that has been made nationally on this issue in a very fast manner. A lot of states allowing both recreational and medical, some just medical only, and there's only a handful of states that do not allow any at all at this point. And so that's quite a bit of progress, if you can call it that, on this issue in only a few short years. So getting into that growth of this issue, it has been quite a job creator, it seems, nationwide. Not as fast as some other industries that are growing in the industry, but in 2018, 64,000 jobs were created in this industry, a 44% gain. Depending on the size of the operation, any operation could employ maybe just a handful of people to dozens in one facility. Of course, this all depends on what municipalities allow. That will determine how many jobs are created in a community. So, transferring over into these the lessons learned, we looked at a lot of different things. We focused on those early legalized states. So that's Colorado, Washington, Oregon, to look at some of the lessons learned, because they've been doing this for years now. So unfortunately, a lot of negative things. Colorado now ranks first in the nation for past month marijuana use by 12 to 18-year-olds, so children. Another interesting thing was that some crime in Denver. So neighborhoods adjacent to marijuana businesses saw an 80% increase in property crimes compared to those without marijuana businesses nearby. Another thing that was news to me is that weed has apparently changed over time. So what is considered Woodstock weed of like the 60s and 70s era, they said had THC content of about 1 to 3%, and THC is the psychoactive component in marijuana. Weed in legalized states today has on average 17% THC, and edibles can contain over 50% THC. So quite a difference. And I think related to that is that last point there about marijuana related calls to poison control. All saw dramatic increases in those three early states there. More lessons learned. Same thing with those early states. Dramatic increases in arrests and fatalities in those states. Workplace positivity rose, and that doesn't mean just walking into work really happy. That means employees actually testing positive for having marijuana in their system. That rose quite dramatically following legalization in those early states. Another point that we wanted to add that we learned was indoor cultivation of 1 kilogram of marijuana requires 5.2 megawatt hours of electricity and releases 4.5 metric tons of carbon emissions. So we thought this was interesting, especially for anyone who's very environmentally conscious. And now to the next part of the presentation, which is some of the conversations that we had with our local neighbors who have opted in. To set the foundation for this, I want to go over some definitions of uses that are allowed in the state of Michigan. So there's a few different types of licenses. So a grower, these are facilities that are licensed to cultivate marijuana. There are 3 classes in the state of Michigan, A, B, and C. A is the smallest, that is up to 100 plants. B is next, that is up to 500 plants, and then C is up to 2,000 plants. There are also retailer licenses, otherwise known as provisioning centers. These are licensed, they're licensed to sell to consumers. There are safety compliance facilities licensed to perform testing. And then there are micro businesses that are essentially licensed to do all 3 of these, but in a small quantity in one establishment. And then the newest license is these consumption establishments, which are licensed to allow for the consumption of marijuana on premises. So think like going to a bar to drink alcohol, but instead you're going there to consume marijuana products. So the first conversation we had with a nearby locality was Madison Heights. So they allow for Class C grow, retail provisioning, and micro businesses. They said that the conception of this, of opting in for them came from the political will of developers and then later from council. They said that the economic argument helped for them, although we found out later that that economic argument, and they found out later that that economic argument is faulty, certainly. So they passed their recreational ordinance in June of this past year. They didn't really do any community survey or any kind of engagement. So for planning and zoning, they allow for green zones, which is basically eligible parcels. So you can find a map on their website of eligible parcels in the city that would qualify for this, for marijuana establishment. It's not a special land use or a conditional land use. So results so far, it's really early for them, as it is with most other nearby municipalities. Tax yield, totally unrealized. Any revenue from application will be from application fees, which was a theme that we saw throughout our research. They don't have any evidence of higher crime or nuisance issues yet. Again, it's really early for that. Same thing with property values, too early to tell. Some advice that they gave us was to limit licenses, carefully select zones and parcels, and do the maximum application fee, which is $5,000. The next conversation that we had was with the city of Berkeley. And they had a marijuana policy team. So this is, we didn't talk to just one person. We talked to their whole team, which was comprised of, public safety, attorneys, city manager's office, which we thought was really great. So they allow for medical and recreational retail provisioning centers. The conception came mostly from residents for them. They did a lot of community engagement around this before they opted in, before they drafted their ordinance, which was probably a really great thing for them. So in terms of planning and zoning, their provisioning centers are essentially just allowed as a retail use. They can be medical and recreational in the same place. They have the 1,000-foot rule, distance rule from schools, which is actually the only distancing recommendation that the state provides in the statute. And they used a merit point system for applications. Results, public safety was hesitant in the beginning. They don't feel as hesitant now or as scared of any increases in crime. But again, really, really early in Berkeley. Their application process, they said, was completely overwhelming, even for their full team that was working on this. And at the moment, they have 3 provisioning centers in the pipeline. So too early to tell on a lot of things. And I believe 2 of those provisioning centers will border Oak Park on 11 Mile. So that will be interesting. So advice for us, do plenty of community engagement. They did. They thought it really worked for them. Have a marijuana policy team. Again, they thought that worked very well for them. They said for us to do our own background checks or for public safety to do them. Have 1 email address to receive applications, have a cutoff for applications and questions, and limit 1 application per venture. The next conversation we had was with Hazel Park, was different from the other conversations that we had. Very interesting. So they allow for grow facilities, retail provisioning, and now consumption lounges. So their conception for them came from residents and city council. Their city manager and council saw it as an opportunity to raise revenue. They had, interestingly, they had help from marijuana industry folks in drafting their ordinance. For planning and zoning, they had a pretty loose selection system, loose application process and selection process. They don't have green zones, and their only distance requirement is 500 feet from schools, which, as I mentioned, the state's recommendation is 1,000 feet. So this is actually below the state recommendation. And so results in Hazel Park. They have 4 recreational dispensaries, 8 Class C grows, and 2 lounges in the pipeline right now. No crime or nuisance issues reported so far. They were able to raise approximately almost $500,000 just on application fees alone, which as we'll kind of hammer home this point, is that really seems to be the only financial gain for municipalities, at least at this point, is those application fees. Minor parking issues reported, and they do have some lawsuits and threats of lawsuit at this point. Advice to us, have a marijuana point person, and that could even be a new hire, because that's how time consuming they say that this is. That they could have had an employee just doing this stuff. That's how time consuming it is. Give preference to new builds because of the higher tax benefit. create a quota for licenses, but also have some flexibility, and never allow just one license of anything, because that could look like, it could look shady. It could look like you already have your licensee in mind, even though that might not be the case. It can look like that. And then the last conversation that we had with nearby municipalities was with the city of Ferndale. They allow for medical caregivers, retail provisioning, and safety labs. They said that they just basically don't have the room for grow facilities in their city. So the conception for them came from their cities, their voters' overwhelming support for Prop 18-1. The residents and council were kind of on the same page here, and council wanted to give residents what they voted for, essentially. They didn't do a whole lot of direct community engagement with it, which they admitted was maybe a mistake. So these facilities are currently allowed in industrial and office zones. They have a 500-foot rule from distance requirement from schools, childcare, and other marijuana establishments. It is a special land use required, and they had basically a first past the post selection of applicants. So as long as you met the minimum threshold for what is required, and you were the first to turn in your application, you were essentially the one that got the license, is what it sounded like to me. So results, they've had some provisioning centers in their city that have been there for a little bit of time now. They said that there's high security around these facilities, no crime issues reported, no nuisance issues reported so far. They said they're overall, pretty impressed with the establishments, and actually mentioned that one of their shops says that most of their customers come from outside of the city. So apparently if you have a really nice marijuana establishment, that can have regional draw. They said it's a net positive for them. Some advice: create a selection committee, much like the city of Berkeley did. Set up a web page to divert applicant questions, and coordinate with DTE to head off any possible electricity issues. We wrapped up our research with having conversations with the Department of Public Safety and our city attorney. So I hope this slide sort of summarizes our hour-long conversation with the Department of Public Safety with Director Cooper and Deputy Director Pinkerton. So they said that building security is an obvious concern for them. They really want to see us implement some distance requirements from residential, from schools, et cetera. As I mentioned, the state recommends only a 1,000-foot rule from schools. They would like us to see us go a little beyond that. They would rather have marijuana establishments confined in one zone or one district, one area. They said that it would make policing these establishments a little easier. They are skeptical of all marijuana-related operations, but especially skeptical of the consumption lounges, just because it's so new. We don't know what those are going to be like yet. We don't know what the implications of those consumption lounges are going to be yet. They haven't heard of any increases in crime from any of their colleagues in neighboring cities, and they don't foresee any additional costs from opting in. And from our conversation with the city attorneys, they recommended a dedicated committee like some other cities had done. The biggest issue that they had that they want to make sure that we get right is the application and appeal process. They said doing a point-based system for applications to score applications is fine, as long as we stay away from subjective criteria. Once we allow subjective criteria, that could possibly open us up to lawsuits, which we do not want. We do have the authority to limit the number of licenses. This is something that we weren't sure about, because apparently some cities are getting sued on this. We weren't sure. But they said we do absolutely have the authority to limit the number of licenses for any use. We need to have the ability to revoke licenses and do the maximum application fee as well. So some conclusions from our research, some overall themes here. This is a very time-consuming process. We heard this from everybody. It's going to take a lot of manpower and hours here. It's a very time-consuming process. It seems little to zero tax benefit, as I mentioned. None of the cities we talked to said that they have seen any tax benefit so far. Any financial gain will be from application fees. Property values, whether they go up, down, totally inconclusive at this point. Same thing with higher crime or nuisances. there are some obvious negative social impacts that we've seen in other states, especially those early states. And lastly, it can result in dilapidated buildings being redeveloped, which would be a plus. So things council would need to decide is where do we go from here? Do we continue this conversation? Do we revisit opting it at all, or do we end it here? If so, do we do community engagement? How much? And then next steps would be things like, what do we allow? Which uses do we allow? How many of which uses do we allow? And along the way, we would need to make sure that we have the city attorneys help us at every step of the way to avoid lawsuits, because that was one thing that we heard from a lot of cities, that they're either getting lawsuits, threats of lawsuits, or just downright scared that they're going to get hit with a lawsuit someday. And with that, I appreciate your time and your attention, and Kim and I will be happy to take any questions.
Colton, Madam Mayor, may I ask a question?
Of course.
Colton, do you have copies of these maps?
I do.
Can I, maybe you were going to go there anyway, but let me, if I could, were you?
Well, we were going to see where the conversation led, where the questions led. So I guess I'll lead into that a little bit. We did have some maps created, some zoning maps created of what it would look like, the parcels that would be allowed to have these marijuana establishments with different distance requirements. So if we had nothing at all, or if we had 500 feet from schools, 1,000 feet. So we actually have 4 different maps. I'm not sure which one you want me to pull up.
Let me just say this, and then maybe you can choose which ones are best. I have the 500-foot and the 1,000-foot ones in front of the 2 I have in front of me.
Okay.
I think these are most consequential, and I'll tell you why, council members. Having gone through the liquor conversation way back, it seems now, really from a land use perspective, it really came down to the distancing requirement in terms of 500 feet from schools, parks, places of worship, or 1,000 feet. And I think it's important, if you should allow for any one of these 3 uses or a combination thereof, I think it's important to look at, let's say if you allow these to be within 500 feet of a school, park, or place of worship, can we show those maps, the 500-foot maps and then 1,000-foot map?
Yeah, let me see. So I've got a 500-foot from schools, places of worship, childcare, and restaurants serving alcohol. And then I've got a 500-foot from schools, parks, places of worship, and childcare facilities.
Can you just do the schools, parks, and places of worship one with the 500 and the 1,000?
Schools, parks, places. Yeah, sure. So it's going to be a little hard to see because it's long this ways and the screen is not. But let me try to share this here.
Council members, I point this out, and I'm having him pull these up because I think these are very telling. If there's a big if, because we don't know how you feel about it yet, but if you were to allow this, as you'll see from these maps here in a moment, this is essentially where these are the areas you could possibly be allowing these uses.
Is one of them just the state requirement?
We do have a map of that. We can show that. Actually,
I can pull that one up as well.
Okay.
So Colton, explain
This one,
this one first.
Pardon?
So I said, explain this one first, and then we'll work.
Sure. Well, let me start with this. So this one is 500 feet from schools, parks, places of worship, and childcare centers. So this limits us quite a bit. It might be a little hard to see because it's so small. But there's some parcels on 11 Mile. There's like one random one here on Greenfield, a few. Quite a bit in the industrial area, and that is about it that I'm seeing. Now, if you go up to 1,000 feet from schools, parks, and places of worship, it goes down even a little bit more from that. So again, there's still some parcels on 11 Mile. In this area, this is, Coolidge and 696, and down in the industrial areas again, mostly. And then, I'm sorry, which one? Oh, you wanted to see the just schools?
The one that the state requires.
Well, so this is, the state doesn't require this. This is actually just the recommended in this statute. Not required, recommended is the 1,000-foot schools rule. So if we did that, this is what it would look like. Still some parcels up on 11-mile, parcels near, Coolidge and 696, and then mostly in the industrial areas.
Doesn't look that different.
No, it really isn't that different, to be honest with you.
Well, the bigger point that should be made is that it's, and by the way, these maps that you've seen, council members, don't take into account the current uses of these properties. For all we know, these could be filled properties and not going anywhere anytime soon. I think these are just the zoning designations of the properties solely. But I think the point that I'm trying to make, having Colton do that, is it actually, when you really get down to it, if you should allow this, it's in very select areas of the city. It's not in very few cases. Now there are some, but in very few cases with the 3 maps you just saw, does it directly abut a residential area. There's an alley separating it or another commercial zone separating it, whatever it may be, in most cases.
Now, I noticed there are some, there's at least one facility along 8 Mile. It's probably a medical marijuana facility. Right? So it's I think, west of Coolidge, somewhere around there. So what difference would it make whether, and we have to allow medical facilities, right, everywhere? I mean, or would we also be having to decide to allow medical marijuana facilities, even though obviously there is one already? So how do these really differ?
So Colton, I think that's an important question to ask, because I think the distinction between medical and the provisioning center and the retail and the grow and all that, could you just redefine that?
Well, okay, yeah, I mean, so first of all, we've been told by a lot of people that the medical marijuana seems to be, it'll kind of die out eventually as recreational just takes over everything. So in investing any time or effort into medical seems, not a great thing to do. But the difference is, I mean, I don't know if you want me to pull that slide up again with the definitions. I'm not sure if you
No, my question really is, like, from a practical standpoint, what's the difference between a medical marijuana facility and a recreational marijuana facility? I mean, if you have a consumption establishment, I understand that. Like, obviously you can go in and do what you want to do and get high, but if it's a different kind of marijuana facility, what's the difference whether it's medical or recreational for practical purposes?
I would say this. I think Colton just made a good point, which is, in the conversations that I've had, and I know they've had, I think the retail recreational would replace the medical. I mean, there's really no difference, except that right now with medical, it requires a card and an ID. But I mean, that I don't think anyone thinks that's going to be around much longer. But it would be the retail storefronts that would replace that then, right?
But there's still, when you drive by, you know what you're driving by, because they have to put that, that symbol that looks sort of like a cross, or whatever. But my understanding is that because there's almost no financial benefit for cities, I know the state, there's an excise tax that's pretty high on these businesses, that a lot of people are not going to let go of their marijuana cards because it's cheaper. And cities maybe make more money with medical facilities than recreational facilities. But I mean, that's just further down the road. But that's my understanding, is that these recreational facilities are really expensive, much more so than medical facilities.
Council member, if I could be of assistance in that regard, there is 2 different laws that govern medical marijuana versus recreational marijuana. So at this particular point in time, we have the ability to opt out of the recreational marijuana statute. That is not the case with the medical marijuana. So if that assists in your questions.
Yeah, thank you. I was wondering about that. If we could opt out, but we can't.
That's correct. You can opt out of the recreational marijuana.
Madam Mayor, may I ask Courtney a question on that?
Yeah.
Courtney, I guess that's one of the things I think council members have to weigh is just, how much longer will cities in Michigan and these states where it's been legalized under state statute, how much longer, in your opinion, do we think that we'll have the right to opt out, to continue to opt out?
I think it will just be a short period of time. Eventually, I think the distinction between the medical and the recreational uses will be eliminated. They will, as council member said, probably eliminate the medical provisions eventually once recreational marijuana becomes more commonplace. But this is a discussion that we have had with the MML. It's an ongoing discussion amongst a lot of municipalities at this point.
Right.
And that may certainly happen sooner rather than later, depending on how the new administration on the federal level handles the marijuana issue. And if it becomes legal on the federal level, we'll probably see some significant changes.
What kind of changes would we see if it is legalized on the federal level?
I think we will see a lot more discretion given under our statute in Michigan in terms of regulating the recreational marijuana. We probably might see the state try to mirror whatever regulations are adopted by the feds, since we won't be able to regulate any stricter guidelines than what is allowed on the federal side. This is all just speculation at this point, but I think as well, the medical distinction will be eliminated going forward if we see legalization in the federal side.
Just practically speaking, I thought, well, let's just continue to opt out until somebody puts a proposal on the ballot, at which time we could put a more limited proposal on the ballot. And I was sure that the taxpayers would go along with what their government recommends. Then that happened in Pontiac, where the marijuana people wrote their ordinance very broadly with very few limits in where or how many, and the city countered with the proposal with limited spaces and limited numbers. And the marijuana industry has a lot of money to promote its proposal. The city is not going to be advertising that way. And if it happens like it happens in Pontiac, it's pretty much unlimited, pretty much written by the marijuana industry the way it is. So that was my motivation for taking a new look at the study, that if we are going to have it, it would be better to have the ordinance written by us rather than written by the marijuana industry. So given that, I would like to get some opinions from some staff members. Director Maroney, I know that you've been looking into this a lot. Can you give us your personal feedback on your feelings about it?
Well, I would say through my research, I've learned a whole lot about the industry and the pros and cons of it. A lot of things I didn't even realize before. I think that in order for city council or the staff to move forward on it, I think we need to continue the conversation, working with our city attorneys and of course, city manager Tungate and city council to determine whether we want to do this. I think we need to engage with the community and see if it is the will of them. I think of many times the NIMBYism that's in place, and yes, they may have voted over 60% on the ballot, but once we start saying it's going to be, 100 feet from your house or whatever the case may be, we may get different opinions, just like when we had Jefferson Oaks go in and we had a lot of pushback, even though it was a perfectly allowed use. So I think community engagement is going to be key here. And I would, my suggestion is at least to move forward and continue in the research with this, start the community engagement, have more conversations with council, bring in some experts, maybe if you wanted to listen to them, and make an educated decision that way.
Okay. City Attorney, Courtney Krause. Do you have an opinion? I know that people are worried about having some kind of point system, that whoever didn't win the point system was going to sue the city because you didn't pick our provisioning center, you picked theirs.
Just a few points to clarify, Madam Mayor. First of all, the issue in Pontiac concerning the litigation over marijuana facilities, that was not involving the city's ability to opt out. So municipalities have the ability statutorily to opt out at this point, and there really is no question legally whether or not we have that right. So I think that if there is any litigation, it will be concerning what our standards are for allowing marijuana facilities in the city, not necessarily our ability to opt out. And most of the lawsuits, which we're kind of learning from day by day, concern whether or not the individual restrictions implemented by municipalities to allow these facilities are consistent with the statute, the spirit and intent of the statute, and don't require additional character or additional requirements that have no relationship with the statute. For example, we've seen a majority of our lawsuits concerning municipalities requiring businesses to have certain aesthetic appearances or improvements to the building, things that have no relationship to the marijuana statute itself, versus requirements that pertain to public safety, that would consider what number of employees are employed by the business, what security measures are in place, what is the experience of the business owner. Those things are proper considerations versus if we consider how much investment they're putting into the building, what does the facade look like? So there is a distinction there. And because the statute and the case law is constantly evolving, we're going to be learning from what we see from lawsuits coming out of other municipalities going forward.
So the cities that put in a point system, if you're going to build a facility, it should be a mixed, you get extra points if it's a mixed use building or that kind of thing. Those things are going to be questioned legally. Is that correct?
Not necessarily the type of the structure, but you're going to have to look at what the statute requires in terms of regulating the marijuana industry and correspondingly implementing points based upon each applicant's ability to meet those requirements. So if you
But putting in a mixed use building isn't anywhere in the state statute.
correct, but mixed
It's
use,
an additional city, requirement or request.
it's not specific to the statute, but mixed use would be consistent with what our zoning would require for that type of a business. But in terms of the point system, the points that are awarded to applicants as the city evaluates the applications, the points have to be, there has to be a corresponding with the statutory requirements. So if you, Director Maroney had circulated a document earlier outlining some proposed points, and I commend her for putting this together as it's very consistent with what we've seen from case law to date. And as you note that there is points awarded based upon the business's viability, the funding, as well as the security that's being provided, whether or not they're meeting the requirements of the statute for the safety and disposal of the marijuana, those types of things that have a direct relationship with the statute and not something such as, what kind of landscaping they're putting outside the building, if that helps.
So at first they told us that the city was going to make a fortune on taxes or whatever. That was a crock. And then it was going to be that you can get some economic development out of this. And I'm not sure if that is valid either.
That might be something that we see in the future, Madam Mayor, because the way that the statute was set up by the state is allowed to recover its fees and costs associated with implementing and regulating this particular statutory scheme before any revenue is distributed to the licensing jurisdictions. So it may be several years before municipalities are seeing any revenue from this particular statute. So
And
it's,
at that point, the state will change its mind and decide it needs more money than we need, and more money will go to the state. I mean, we've seen this happen so many times. I'm a little jaded by now about how the cities are going to make out like bandits, which they're not. So it's like any other use, but there's questions about it. So I appreciate the amount of work and research that's gone into this. And I would love to take it home, read it over, study it a little bit, and then come up with some more questions, I think, after we've chewed it over. I wonder if City Council has any impressions right off the bat that they would like to share, or would you rather study it and come back and make comments?
Well,
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I'm sorry, Julie, go ahead.
no, go ahead. It's fine.
Well, I don't have any questions. I understand everything that was presented tonight, and I appreciate all the work that went into it. I do have a few observations that I'd like to share. The first thing is, I want to begin by saying that I am absolutely ashamed of the federal government for being such chickens. They absolutely ought to be ashamed of themselves for kicking this to the states, even though this is illegal, flat out. There's no question about it. This is as illegal as meth, crack, or heroin under federal law. So for the federal government to turn a blind eye and tell the states, you guys go and do it and we'll just pretend like we don't see you, because they don't want to be on record voting one way or the other, shame on them. Shame on them for forcing us to take up an issue which is a federal issue and forcing states to take on a federal issue. And here's why shame on them. I took an oath when I became a lawyer to support the Constitution of the United States. We all took oaths in City Council to support the Constitution of the United States. And part of the Constitution is the Supremacy Clause, which includes preemption. When the federal government says one thing, we don't get to go against it. That's the oath that we took. For the federal government to go now and say, you know what, we're just going to pretend like you guys didn't take your oaths. It doesn't really matter. Nobody really cares. Go right ahead and violate federal law. It's okay. It's a dangerous precedent. It's a precedent that the federal government ought to be ashamed of itself for forcing states to do. On the other hand, what are the states supposed to do? The federal government is living in a different century. They're refusing to get with the times, just like they've done historically. And if you look at how long it took it to become you know how long it took for it to become illegal in this country to discriminate based on race? 1964. That's how slow the federal government works. And they ought to be ashamed of themselves. And that shame continues today. So this is an issue right now where I think marijuana should be legal. 100 million %. If it was up to me, I would say this should be legal. There's no reason in the world for it to be illegal. In fact, I think that some of the restrictions that the state proposes are kind of arbitrary. I really do. 1,000 feet, that's a big distance. If there's turns and corners and there's walls in between, it's very arbitrary. It doesn't make any sense. So for them to, so on the one hand, I'm very libertarian when it comes to this. I think it should be legal. But on the other hand, I took an oath as a lawyer and as a councilman to support the Constitution of the United States. And if we vote in favor of this, we are violating that oath. So shame on the federal government for kicking this to us, but I cannot in good conscience vote for this because it violates federal law, and that would violate my oath. That's the bottom line. I've been thinking about this a tremendous amount over the months, and that's my position on this. Sorry, Julie, you were saying?
Appreciate it. Councilmember.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but so many cities have adopted these ordinances, because citizens, residents obviously want marijuana to be legal. But my understanding is if there's really no money, if there's no monetary benefit for cities, and so far cities haven't realized any windfall in taxes, I think the only reason why this is coming up at all is we're afraid that a marijuana organization, a pro-marijuana organization, is going to send around petitions to get it on our ballot like they did in Pontiac. We could hold out and that will happen here for sure. I mean, we're just we're just in a line of dominoes. We've got all of Southeast Oakland with facilities. We're the only city without them. So it's going to happen whether we like it or not. And I think Mayor McClellan, if I'm correct, you want to head off these attempts to get it on our ballot, correct?
Yeah.
Right. So, but I would agree with you, Councilman Radner. I think these laws are sort of arbitrary and ridiculous. We allow liquor to be sold anywhere, pretty much. So, yeah. And you know what? My guess is that in the next 4 years, we're going to see some movement in the federal government on this. And I don't think it'll be a controlled substance anymore. So we'll be free to do what we want. But in the meantime, I mean, if we want to head off these pro-marijuana groups, then we sort of have to have an ordinance that allows for them.
Madam Mayor, may I ask a question?
Yes, please. Councilmember Whitehead.
So if we did want to head off the marijuana groups, is it possible that what we come up with and approve that they may not be happy with that, and then they may want to get even more, they might want to still even try to go get a petition? Is that possible?
I'm sure anything is possible, but I know that if nothing happens, that we're a prime target because we voted 68.5% in favor of marijuana. And because we happen to be a very dense city, so it's easy to go door to door and do a campaign. And the people who are running the campaigns are looking at us seriously.
Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Radner.
I think that if the people circulate their own petitions and it gets voted on, I think that's a good thing. I think that should happen. I think that might give the federal government the kick in the pants that they need to do the right thing. But that does not require me to violate my oath, in my opinion. And I do want to be very clear about something. This is something that we're probably going to disagree on. This is my own personal opinion of this topic. I don't want you guys to think just because I'm saying this forcefully that I'm going to lose respect for anybody who votes for it because they're violating their oath. That's not, I want to be very clear. This is what I think for myself and what my opinion is. Okay, so just wanted to clear that up, but at the same time,
the idea
don't wanna
that
vote
it
for
would
something.
go, the idea that it would go on the ballot would be fine with me. But when the marijuana, recreational marijuana industry writes the ordinance to put on the ballot, it's anywhere as many as you want. No limit.
I understand that.
They're
And
right.
we should call Gary Peters and Debbie Stabenow and anybody else we know in Washington to tell them to do the right thing and to give everybody the kick that they need so that marijuana lobbyists are not writing the laws, even though
Okay,
they'll
I
probably be writing
assign
the laws
you
in DC
those
too.
2 calls tomorrow morning and you let me know how it goes.
Madam
Yeah,
Mayor,
good idea.
yeah, Madam Mayor.
Yes, ma'am. This is Mayor Pro Tem Burns.
Yeah, as you guys know, I have always been against the marijuana being sold in the city of Oak Park, and I think we should opt out. I am in, my reasons are very similar to Councilmember Radner's. My main reason is it's not legal. It's still not legalized federally. And until that happens, it's illegal, plain and simple. And then also, I don't want to be able to have people buy marijuana where I live. That's my personal opinion on that. And I think a lot of my other concerns were addressed during the presentation in regards to the property values. And I was concerned about smoking or consuming on the premises, but that was addressed. That would be a go. So I'm dead set against it. I'm dead set against it. I've always said no, and I will continue to say no, but I'll keep an open mind.
Good. That's all we can, we had all said no a year ago. We all agreed. No, we don't need this. We don't want it. We're worried about kids using and all of that. I am hedging the other way because I don't want one of these places buying out Lincoln Drugs and putting recreational marijuana provisioning center on the corner.
Yeah,
So that's,
I don't want us to make a decision based on what some other support or lobbyist group might do in the future. They may, so we're gonna act this way to cut them off in case they do this. I wouldn't be for that. I wouldn't be for that.
I appreciate the,
I mean, because we don't know when it could happen. You know,
Right.
it could happen in the very near future, or it could not happen for quite a while.
I appreciate all of your input. A year ago, we all said no way, and we're still studying. Because a year ago, when we said no way, it was going to be a big money maker for the city. That's not an attraction. That hasn't happened. So we will continue to look into this. We'll continue our conversations. We'll study what was sent to us, and I hope Colton, you will send us that presentation, please, and all the maps that were brought up. Anyone else who wanted to voice an opinion on the staff or anywhere that has that would help us with our our interesting choice?
Madam Mayor, are you taking questions from the audience or?
Yes, I think if we're done at this point, we will see, is there anyone in the audience who is listening, who would like to comment? And who is monitoring that? Colton, is that still you now? Are you in charge?
No, Mayor, I'm here.
Okay,
If anyone would like to speak, please raise your hand in the participant list or leave a message in the chat.
oh, and City Manager Tungate, did you have an opinion?
Madam Mayor, of course I have an opinion, but I'm going to reserve my opinion until the next time you talk about it.
Okay.
Kenneth Sherman, you can go ahead and speak.
Thank you. I came in a little late because I had some technical issues, so I may have missed this at the beginning. Can you clarify for me why this is coming up now, if it's been, an issue, prior to this Zoom meeting? Why is it suddenly coming up for the city of Oak Park to have this conversation and decision-making process?
Madam Mayor, I can address that if you'd like.
That would be great. Thank you.
It's coming up now because the council decision at the time of this, back in 2018, at the time that this was approved by the voters of Michigan, we took the wait and see approach. And so we're, it's been a few years. Granted, a lot of these entities are not up and running. As we mentioned, there's some in Berkeley on their way, close to 11 Mile. So I think, we thought it was time to bring this back and take a temperature and see where things were at. So that's why.
And what happens if you opt not to do anything at all? What does that mean?
There is a good possibility that the marijuana industry will put a proposal on the ballot.
Which doesn't necessarily mean that it will pass or not.
Necessarily, except the last one passed by 68.5%. And those in the industry are betting that this one would pass too.
I'd be shocked if it doesn't pass.
Yeah. Yep.
So is there a difference if you decide to do it proactively or wait for the marijuana industry to push it through? I mean, is there different things that the city could have in place if they do it now versus waiting for it to pass and the marijuana people, put what they want in?
We would certainly restrict where and how many, and the marijuana industry would not have any restrictions as I understand it was in Pontiac. Anyway, it is 6:57. And in case anyone has to powder their nose between now and the 7 o'clock meeting, you have 3 minutes. So this meeting is adjourned. I thank you so much for your time and your attention.
I'll apologize in advance. I'm still in the car.
No, you're
But it's
fine. We can hear you just fine.
Okay.
Almost better auditory than normal.
All right. I don't know if that's a good thing, but all right. At least you're able to hear me.
And no kids running, so this could be your quiet spot. Oh, let's see. Welcome. Oh, is that Liz Bauer? Elizabeth Bauer. Oh my gosh, the former president of the State Board of Education. Is that correct? Wait, oops. Liz, unmute yourself. Liz, unmute, find your mute button.
Yeah, okay. I'm sorry. Yes. No, I wasn't the president. I served 8 years and loved every minute of it. Kathy Strauss was president while I was
Okay.
on the board. Yeah.
State Board of Ed. Okay. Wonderful. Welcome. We're so delighted to have you. What city are you living in?
I live in Ferndale.
Ferndale,
So,
right?
just down the road.
Down the road.
Or over, I guess one would say.
Oh, that's neat. So
Yeah.
you and
You
Mary
guys-
Schusterbauer are over there, and
Pardon?
you and Mary Schusterbauer.
Oh, yeah. She's a few blocks away. My regular walking route is across Oak Park Boulevard to Scotia, and then down and then back over here. So I feel very connected to Oak Park in many ways.
Very neat.
It's really great. Yeah.
That's great. Oh.
Hey, Madam Mayor, we're gonna get ready to start in about 1 minute.
In about 1 minute. All right. Let's
Yep.
see.
Let's see.
Michelle, what's your official title? A judge or chief judge or?
I'm Chief Judge of the 45th District Court.
So that we call you Chief Justice?
No, oh, no. A big jump.
Chief Justice. Yes. Chief Justice.
Let's move her up.
That's, there you go. So just Judge.
Judge Apple.
Got
Judge
it.
Michelle Friedman Apple is just fine.
I'm putting you in the Supreme Court.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take it, but I don't think I would be
Getting
there.
ready to start here.
That might
everyone.
be a problem.
Not just in the Supreme Court, in charge of the Supreme Court.
That's right. That's right.
All
When I
right.
move them up, I really move them up.
Thank
How you
you.
doing, Madam Mayor, City Council, and City Manager Erik Tungate? We're about to start the Tuesday, January 19, 2021 virtual City Council meeting, and it is all yours, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. I would like to call the regular City Council meeting of January 19th, 2021 to order at 7:01 PM. City Clerk Ed Norris, would you call the roll?
Mayor McClellan,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Burns,
Here.
Councilmember Radner,
Here.
Councilmember Edgar,
Here.
and Councilmember Whitehead.
Here.
Okay, we have a complete quorum. Next, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Thank you.
Seconded.
Councilmember Burns, and a second by Juliet.
Edgar.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carried. Next, we have the consent agenda. These are routine items presented without discussion. If you would like one removed and discussed, we can handle it. These are the items in the consent agenda. Regular council meeting minutes of January 4th, 2021. Special city council meeting minutes at the same date. Board of Review meeting minutes of December 17th, 2020. And finally, licenses, new and renewals is submitted for January 19th, 2021. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Councilmember Edgar, second by Mayor Pro Tem Burns. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Are there elected officials, aside from those for the special presentation, who are here to speak? Seeing none.
Looks like we have Charlie Cavell is here to.
Charlie Cavell. Charlie. Charlie is our new Oakland County Commissioner. Is there any update that you would like to give us, maybe about the COVID shots and the waiting line thing?
Would love to do that. Yes.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah. So I'm Charlie Cavell, our 18th District County Commissioner. We replaced Helene Zach, who was our great commissioner for almost 2 full decades. So we've hit the ground running. So to your question, Mayor McClellan, if I could just jump in with a quick COVID update and then a unique opportunity for small business owners that, going right into it. First, to give you all context, I and the County Commission are in regular communication with the mayor and the council. There's a lot of information and a lot of things changing and moving. As you know, if you've been keeping up with the news, something you heard 12 hours ago is all of a sudden out of date. So we've been consistently emailing with each other. So if you ever have a question, I would love to be a resource. 248-807-4347. That's my cell phone. Call, text anytime. But to dig into where we are.
Would you repeat that number, please?
Sorry, my cell is 248-807-4347. And what's nice about Oakland County is they use 12 cents of your tax dollars to put that sticker on the back, so I remember the cell phone number. So to give us an update of kind of the funnel of where we are, and then I'll say a little bit about what's new. So where we are, state of Michigan gets about 60,000 doses a week. The governor in the last week has asked for 100,000 additional doses because where we are today is phase 1B. If you're 65 and up, an EMS, essential worker, someone who works or lives in a long-term care facility, you qualify. So when we were going, and this is also very fresh information, on Friday I had a conversation with the medical director for the state of Michigan, Dr. Joni Caldoon, and then just this afternoon at 3 o'clock, that's where I'm wearing this nice outfit, not just for you all, but had a chat with the #2 Deputy County Executive Hillary Chambers to get the skinny on what's really going on with COVID vaccine and what the rollout plan is. So Michigan's getting 60,000 doses a week. 100,000 doses is what the governor has asked for from the federal government. Oakland County has been getting about 2,000 doses a week. We this week have now gotten 7,200. So those arrived Monday and will start to be distributed today. So that all builds to the fact that Oakland County has the capacity at full speed to provide 12,000 doses to people a week. And Michigan has the capacity to provide 100,000 doses to people per week. So where the bottleneck is coming in is from the federal government not being able to provide us with enough supply. And the second thing is when we moved from phase 1A to 1B, we went from trying to vaccinate with 2 doses, mind you, a few thousand EMS essential workers that were doing like frontline stuff, people in the hospitals, people that are police, public safety, the people that you talk to when you're having one of the worst nights of your life. Those people, it's a few thousand people that are really doing the work. And so giving them those few thousand people shots over the course of 2 or 3 weeks was fairly doable because we got 2,000 shots a week and there were 2,000 people that needed them. So the need was met. Where we saw this big ballooning and huge surge in demand is with the 200,000 65 and up people that live in Oakland County. So what we are asking from Oakland County government is for a heck of a lot more vaccine from the governor, and the governor in turn has then put a lot of pressure on the federal government to not only provide her with more vaccine, but she's pushing a effort through the legislature right now, a $5.6 billion fund to pay for buying more vaccine. So we would be able to jump the line. That has yet to be passed, but that's a topic of conversation. So this is how urgent people in our leadership are feeling that. So COVID update as of today, 188 new cases was the 7-day rolling average for last week. We had 0 deaths yesterday. Oakland County has 17,221 appointments set, and we have about 2,500 new doses this week. So that means that there will still be about 15,000 appointments if no new appointments are made. You can still go online to save your spot, which is oaklandcountyvaccine.com. It's a great way to save your spot, and it's an online registration form.
Repeat that, please, one more time.
oaklandcountyvaccine.com. And that's to save your spot online and also glean any information about the vaccine, about how many doses you need, where the 5 sites from Oakland County government you can go to, or, so these are some of the things you can do. 1, oaklandcountyvaccine.com to save your spot. 2, talk to your primary care provider. Go to your hospital system, right? If you're at Beaumont, Ascension, Henry Ford, McLaren, St. Joseph Mercy, these are all places that also have been receiving the vaccine. So there's a link on oaklandcountyvaccine.com where you can start going through your own patient portal with your healthcare provider to get their vaccine dose. It might not be the Pfizer dose that OakGov has been getting, but it will still be approved COVID vaccine that will help save your life. And then the last 2 things you can do is if you have questions that you think you have a unique situation, because I've been getting a lot of calls about people with unique situations. So to be able to make sure you're getting what you need and staying as safe as possible, call Nurse on Call, 800-848-5533. And that's answered business hours, Monday through Friday, 8 to 6, and Saturdays, 9 to noon. And again, that's 800-848-5533. And it's a real live nurse, and they've something like quadrupled the number of staff that are answering those calls in the last 2 weeks, because there's up to 28,000 calls an hour for that. Because again, we have to vaccinate an additional 200,000 people. So there's that. Sign up online, oaklandcountyvaccine.com, call Nurse on Call, or get text updates from OakGov at 28748. Text the word OakGov to 28748. And just to put into, yes, Mayor?
Notice that when I signed up for Save Your Spot, it asked if you are an essential worker. It asked your age, but I didn't see a place for it to say, I'm 26, but I'm a transplant patient.
Yeah.
Those are the people who might want to call the Nurse on Call directly. Is that right?
Yes. And for those people that have a specific medical situation, like being a transplant patient or having kidney problems or be on dialysis or anything like that, it's really important too to help coordinate with your doctor regardless, just to make sure you're doing the safest thing for the vaccine. So if you do have a primary care provider or a hospital that you go to regularly, go to them first, because they'll have your electronic medical record and they might even be able to say, oh, what were you waiting in line for? We got to make sure you're safe. And then also, again, just to reaffirm, when you go to the oaklandcountyvaccine.com, which is the website, that is the best place to go to get more information. You'll see that we've received X amount of doses, which was just updated with the new shipment to about 15,000 doses Oakland County has received. There have been something like 7,800 vaccinations or shots administered by Oakland government, and there are 0 available appointments because there are 17,000 people on the Save Your Spot or who have registered online to be in the queue. So those extra doses that we got this week, the additional 5,200 doses we got, are going to go straight into first phase 1A people, because there's a bunch of people in Oakland County Jail that are in close contact. Second, there's a bunch of health workers for Oakland County government that are in close contact with people who may be COVID positive. And then third, there's going to be 2,500 doses, roughly 3,000 in that range, that can be administered to the public. So that waiting list should go from 17,000 down to 14,000 if no one else signs up. So dates for getting the appointment, if you're in phase 1 or B, one of those 250,000 Oakland County residents, is probably backlogged to about March 1st without getting more vaccine. So the last thing I'd ask and urge is, one, knock on wood, spin around 3 times, pray to whoever you believe in or whatever you think, that the federal government will take action, especially, at noon on January 20th, because there is a backlog bottleneck from the county government pressuring the governor, and our governor, by the way, is in a consortium of like 15 governors who are putting heavy pressure on the federal government to be able to release more vaccine to meet the demand. So that's the big overview. One last tidbit I'll give about COVID is we are 1.7% through vaccinating phase 1A and 1B alone. And we are about 0.5% of the way through vaccinating 70% of Oakland County, because again, there's 2 doses you need. So 1.2 million people, 70% of that's roughly 800,000. That means we need 1.6 million doses. And if you go to oaklandcountyvaccine.com, you'll see there are 15,000 doses total so far administered by Oakland County government. So we're just at the beginning. And we're also building the plane as we fly it, because none of us have lived through a pandemic before. So if I could just first also say thank you to everyone who's reached out, again, calling the number, texting, with helpful suggestions, because today I gave 3 or 4 of them to our deputy county executive, and she said, oh, great idea. We should do that. So please keep them coming, because you are helping. This is a truly community effort. So that's the COVID update. Small business update. There's small business grants coming online from the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. It's called the Small Business Survival Grant. If you're a small business owner, please reach out to me or the mayor or city manager or the economic development director, because they've also gotten that information, and it could be a thing that saves your small business.
Commissioner Cavell, that has been very informative, and I sure appreciate your report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Are there any other elected officials who would like to provide an update? Okay. That brings us to the fun part of today's meeting. We have a proclamation recognizing the Honorable David M. Gubo, Chief Judge Pro Tem of our court for many years. And he is retiring. And we just want to share with him how grateful we are for his service. And I think wave hi to Mom in Florida. So being a mom, I know that you're very proud tonight. This is a City of Oak Park official proclamation honoring the Honorable David M. Gubo. And I will read it for you. Whereas the Honorable David M. Gubo, Chief Judge Pro Tem of the 45th District Court, retires from court leadership and service. And whereas the Honorable David M. Gubo was first elected in 2002 and reelected in 2008 and 2014. He earned his AB degree and a varsity letter from U of M, his JD from the University of Detroit School of Law. Judge Gubo served as Chief Judge of the 45th from 2003 to 7, and as Chief Judge Pro Tem from 2008 to the present. And whereas before being elected to the bench, Judge Gubo honorably represented our community for 7 terms in the Michigan legislature as our state representative from 1985 to 1998. And we have someone who will give us a few details about that, that term of service and achievements thereof. He was assistant clerk of the Michigan House of Representatives from 1999 to 2002, served as an attorney for more than 40 years, and while in the private practice of law, served as mediator for circuit court district and small claims cases, and is an adjunct professor at the University of Detroit Mercy School of Law. And whereas while serving as district court judge, Judge Gubo developed and initiated the 45th District Court Mental Health Court. Close to my heart and my family's heart, so I thank you for that. The first mental health treatment court in Oakland County. And whereas Judge Gubo is a member of the American Judges Association, Michigan District Judges Association, State Bar of Michigan, Oakland County Bar, and is active with a variety of other community, religious, and civic organizations. Judge Gubo has lectured for the Institute of Continuing Legal Education, was appointed and served as public administrator, was an officer and member of the Oakland County Building Authority. So now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Marian McClellan, Mayor of the City of Oak Park, Michigan, on behalf of the Oak Park City Council and our residents, by proclamation, do hereby recognize and honor David M. Gubo for his exemplary service and dedication to our community, and wish him health, happiness, and fulfillment in his well-earned retirement. In testimony whereof, I have officially signed my name and caused the seal of the City of Oak Park to be affixed this 19th day of January 2021 on David Gubo Day in the City of Oak Park. So there it is. Wasn't that handled well? Light of hand for Zoom. That was pretty good.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Judge Gubo, do you have a word you'd like to share?
First to you and the council, I thank you very, very much. You introduced my mother. I do have a few family here. Nobody can do any of these kind of public service positions, and I've had an honor to, as you mentioned, my career for over 35 years of public service in our community, and nobody does it alone. And I've my mom, who's 94 years of age, she's here. She went out and knocked on doors. I know, as all of us as elected officials have done, and she did that. One of my sisters, Mona, is with her in Florida. My other sister, Janie, is here. She is with her friend, I think that's Nick, with her. They're in Colorado. And let's see, I got my wife. She didn't want to be on camera. She's off to my left, my wife, Dottie. Our daughters, Rachel is here from New York. Jackie is, she's there with her to-be husband or fiance, Aaron. They're in Bloomfield Hills right now. They kind of moved back to Michigan during the virus. And then I think I've got Earl and Elaine Hecker, a brother and sister-in-law there. So they've always been in my corner, and I thank them for their support. And from the court, Judge Apple's here. And Judge Apple and I got elected originally together, and we've served together for my 18 years. She's got a couple more years on this term, and then she can run again. And so, and then the person that took my spot and is going to do a great job is the new judge in the 45th District Court, Judge Jamie Horowitz. So my thanks also to Judge Apple and all of those at the court. It's a real family in the 45th District Court, and everybody helps out. And especially during this pandemic, people are doing all kinds of things they never did before. And so Judge Apple, I thank you and all of the other members of the court, our court administrator, Nancy Waldman, and all our staff for all of your help and support over the years. I do also, I see some people from our mental health treatment court that you mentioned. Liz Bauer and I go way back to my days in the legislature. She's our public citizen representative on that treatment court. And I think I saw John Engad, who's our attorney that represents the defendants in these matters in the court. And I think I saw Megan Hebert from Oakland County Community, well, it's not OCHN now. She's our representative assigned to our court. So they've also been a terrific help. And then I see Director Cooper. I do want to say that he and all of the members of the Department of Public Safety, I would put the Oak Park Department of Public Safety up against any police agency in the state. They do a terrific job. And even when I got phone calls at 4 o'clock in the morning that one of his officers needed a search warrant, they always apologized before they asked what they needed. So to Director Cooper and all of his staff and the Detective Bureau, the road folks, they're just top notch. So I thank them. And I also especially want to thank the people of our community for electing me to serve, first to represent them in the legislature for all those years, and then giving me the honor to serve in the district court and showing me their faith and confidence in my ability to be fair and impartial as a member of the bench. So to you and all the members of the city council and the city manager and the clerk who I've worked with as well. And I would also be remiss if I didn't thank the prior councils that very admirably represented the city of Oak Park and the former Mayor Naftali when I first got elected. At the court, we've always worked real well with you, Madam Mayor, and the council. As far as working through budgets, we've had difficult times in some, but we always managed to do things that benefited the court and the city and the people of City Oak Park. So I thank you very much for this proclamation. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your service, David. You've made court a good place to be. I know that Judge Apple also has a presentation that she would like to make. Judge Apple?
Thank you. So I appreciate all the people that Judge Gubo mentioned, and they are the people that impact the court, and I can say have added so much to the success of our court and our program. But he also is being acknowledged for the work he did as a judge throughout the community, and the skills and the knowledge and the application of that inured to the benefit of the community. And I have a proclamation that was signed by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, as well as the Supreme Court members. And I will read it in part. And it says, the Honorable David M. Gubo has shown in his years of tenure on the bench that he has an understanding and his discernment of the impact that both the legal and administrative decisions of a judge has on others. The Honorable David M. Gubo has demonstrated his concerns for parties, children, witnesses, attorneys, law enforcement officials, and the various other people who have appeared before him. Therefore, the Michigan Supreme Court recognizes the Honorable David M. Gubo for his dedication to the citizens of Michigan, his community, the practice of law, and his contribution to Michigan's one court of justice, and wishes him the best in his future endeavors. And we at the court, myself and Judge Horowitz, join in these wishes and congratulate him on a job well done, and only wish him the best and good health in his retirement.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I know that
I was just going to say, Madam Mayor, to Judge Apple and Judge Horowitz, and please send my thanks to the Supreme Court. Judge Apple brought this by the House today, and I'll tell you, one of the advantages of now being retired is that at 3, 4 o'clock, I can get in my lazy boy chair and just fall asleep. So that's where I was today when she brought this by. So Judge Apple, thank you very much. And the best to you and everyone else. And Judge Horowitz, thank you. And the best of everything to you as what will be for you a long and distinguished career as well, I'm sure.
Thank you. Liz Bauer has a few words. She served with you and served on the State Board of Education. Elizabeth Bauer.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and City Council members. As the judge said in his remarks, that we've been working together on policy and mental health issues since 1985 when he came to the state legislature. And I thought at this moment I could go on forever about the judge, but instead I would like to share with you the comments sent to me by Judge Gubo's legislative colleague, the Honorable Lynn Jondal. And together they authored and enacted significant legislation benefiting the people of Michigan. And this is what former Representative Jondal wrote. It's great to participate in David Gubo's public service. I like to think that a bit of David's character rubs off on me just because I can identify myself as a personal friend and legislative colleague of David's. 30 years ago, many of us knew and respected him as a smart and shrewd advocate for mental health policies and programs. He was then the Mental Health Committee chair. We turned to and trusted him when we didn't know those issues and others in detail, and therefore needed intelligent and sensitive education and counsel as we developed strategies and voted. I vividly recall spending weeks on a committee with David fashioning legislation to protect and advance the rights of persons with disabilities in Michigan, legislation that thousands of people still depend on today. David consistently brought to all of this a firm and patient commitment to justice, an intelligent understanding of the issues and implications, and a marvelous ability to communicate these virtues enhanced by a dependable sense of humor. Best wishes, David, as you pursue new adventures. So those are the words of your former colleague, Honorable Lynn Jondal, who co-sponsored with you the amendments to the Michigan Persons with Disabilities Civil Rights Act. Those amendments, among other factors, restored protection of that law to people with mental illness. It took your effort over 4 years, but you persisted, and it is a lasting achievement, and we thank you.
Thank you. Beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you to family and friends and associates who are attending tonight. We appreciate you. It's the beginning of a new career, and we look forward to hearing about your progress. And going from
Mayor,
one to the-
thank you so much. And Liz, thank you very much. And I appreciate that very much. Thanks so much.
Thank you. And we're going from this to an annual audit presentation by Riemann Robertson. Oh, cute.
Madam Mayor, that's the first time I was ever considered the fun part of an agenda. Thank you.
There. All well should come to you. Thank you, David. City Manager Tungate, would you like to introduce our Riemann Robeson representative?
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Judge Gubo, congratulations. Best of luck to you. I am going to turn it over to our Finance Director, Sandra Crawford, council members, but I first want to make sure that you know that, of course, this is our annual audit, and that complies with our fiscal year, June 30, 2020. So, Director Crawford, are you on?
Yes, I am. And before I introduce Madam Mayor and City Council and City Manager Tungate, before I introduce Daniel Clark, who is the auditor that will be presenting the audit highlights to you tonight, I would just like to go over the fiscal year end of 2020 financial highlights as well. We here at the city were experiencing a very good financial year with revenues exceeding the budgeted amounts prior to the COVID-19 shutdown in March of 2020. The COVID-19 pandemic was unusual from a natural disaster standpoint, whereas the city did not incur a significant amount of unbudgeted expenditure shutdowns, but rather it was specifically a revenue loss. The sudden revenue loss was significant, and all federal grants initially available were only to cover the unbudgeted expenditures. And as a result, we here at the city needed to act quickly to reduce the expenditures and to minimize the impact in this loss of revenue. With respect to the general fund, the final amendment budget for the general fund use of fund balance, where the expenditures exceed the revenues in fiscal year 1920, was approximately $763,000. The amended budget was primarily made up of rollover of capital projects from the previous fiscal year of 1819 of about $350,000 and net reductions in revenue related to the COVID-19 pandemic of about $413,000. But due to the quick reaction here at the city, the general fund ended the year at almost break even with only a use on fund balance of about $23,743. This break-even amount is even more impressive given that the city had paid their employees their next year's wages increases that was due for this fiscal year 2021 in June of 2020 to help with the COVID hardship, totaling about $283,000. The advance payment will be reflected in a budget amendment coming up in this fiscal year of 2021. The following are also some highlights of the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, along with the expenditure adjustments implemented here at the city. We did have some cost savings. Numerous wide citywide furloughs were implemented in the months of May through June 2020, saving the general fund approximately $157,000 in fiscal year 1920. Capital projects for the 9 Mile Pocket Park and the swimming pool were postponed until future years, saving approximately $300,000. Pension contributions were accelerated in the current year by shortening the amortization period from 24 years to 18 years. But due to the revenue loss from COVID-19, the city had to change the amortization from 18 years back to 24 years, which caused the savings of about $740,000. With respect to our revenues, losses, and expenditure increases, due to the timing of when the federal grants were available and received, 0 COVID-19 dollars were related from the federal grants in the last fiscal year of June 2020. They are all recorded in this current fiscal year of 2021.
Sandra, can I interrupt you just a moment?
Sure.
Council members, I want to just alliterate an important point that Sandra made. I have been promising you a more detailed report on the impacts of the pandemic. And that will be forthcoming. I know I've assigned Sandra and Kevin, ye are going to be sitting together and going through some of that. It's important to delineate that this is the June 30, 2020 impact.
Yes.
As Sandra just mentioned. So there are federal funds and other things that have happened since June 30.
Yes.
But prior to that, of course, we had furloughed some employees and done some other things prior to that. So I just wanted to clarify that. So
right. Yes, this is all fiscal year ending 1920. Also, the COVID-19 shutdown in March through June of 2020 resulted in about 40 to 50% reduction in statewide sales tax collections, which impact our city's revenue sharing. As a result, the actual distributions from the state fell short of about approximately $283,000, including the elimination of the entire statutory portion of the fiscal year final payment of $174,000. Our Parks and Recs revenue was down approximately $150,000 due to the elimination of the spring and summer programs as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Also, the COVID-19 shutdown resulted in a significant reduction in tickets written as very few drivers were on the road. District Court gross revenue was approximately $355,000 less than originally budgeted due to the cost reductions at the court. The net impact on our general fund was approximately a loss of $156,000. The city also was hit with ransomware and made unbudgeted payments of approximately $106,000. Also, our charges for service revenue specifically related to the building department were significantly more than what was budgeted prior to the shutdown, which is why the loss in revenue from that was only approximately $55,000 from the original budget. With all of that, the city was still able to make the additional budgeted contributions of $400,000 to our retiree healthcare fund, which is also known as our OPEB, our other post-employment benefits, which is over and above the pay-as-you-go amount that we have to pay. As part of our annual year-end closing, the city historically makes an extra contribution to the pension system for any remaining unspent budgeted expenditures, and an extra contribution to the general employees retirement system of approximately $115,000, again, over and above what our required amount is from the actuaries. And the public safety system was able to contribute $103,000 over above the required contribution amount set by the actuaries as well. Again, all of this was made by June 30, 2020. With respect to our major and local streets funds, the COVID-19 shutdown also resulted in drops in gas tax collections from March through June, which significantly impacted the street funds revenue. The overall loss on revenue between both funds, the major street and local streets, was approximately $120,000. With respect to our debt service fund, the city decreased its installment debt of 11% or $3.3 million by refunding our 2010 facility financing bonds. This refinancing lowers the annual millage rate for all residents and businesses of the city beginning this fiscal year 2021. With respect to our water and sewer fund, while the COVID-19 pandemic shutdown did result in most businesses shutting down, water was still being purchased and sewage was still being processed. The net result for the city was an increase in the billings for residential customers during the shutdown and less for businesses. But the net was also about a break even or a slight decrease in usage, which had little impact on the final financial numbers for the fiscal year ended June 30th. And these are just some of the highlights that I wanted to point out to you, Mayor, City Council, that can be found in the comprehensive annual financial report that you have received electronically. But those are just some of the things that I wanted to cover with you. And so with that, I will turn it over to Daniel Clark from Riemann Robson, and he can go into the audit highlights as well.
Hi, good evening. Can everyone hear me okay? I believe there's going to be a presentation put on the screen, so we'll wait for that. But while that's coming up, again, my name is Daniel Clark. I am the signing principal for Raymond Robson. We're the external auditor for the city of Oak Park. And just thank you to the city for another successful audit. And if you can go to that next slide, we'll talk about the agenda items for tonight to make this as streamlined as possible. So just want to introduce our team members that were on the audit this year. We'll have a couple board communications. We'll talk through some very high level financial results as Sandra covered a lot of the detail. We will just present those at a very high level. We'll talk about some upcoming accounting pronouncements that may or may not affect your financial statements moving forward, and then open it up for any questions. But if there are questions as I go through the presentation, please feel free to stop me at that point. So again, I am the signing principal. The main manager, Amanda Wedgwood, was planning on being here tonight, but she just welcomed her first child about 5 or 6 days ago. So she was not able to attend. And then we had Allie Sallow, who was the main staff on the audit. So all three of us were consistent from last year, and there were a couple other staff that also participated. Next slide, please. So just a few board communications. We did issue an unmodified opinion on your June 30th, 2020 financial statements. So that's what's called a clean opinion, exactly what you would be looking for, a grade A if you wanted to grade it. So very well done by the city. We're also asked to communicate whether we implemented any new accounting pronouncements, and there were none that were implemented for fiscal year 20. There was one that was going to be effective for 2020, but due to COVID, all accounting pronouncements were delayed 1 year. And I'll speak to that at the very end of the presentation when talking about upcoming accounting pronouncements. We're also asked to assess and deem whether the accounting estimates in the financial statements were reasonable. That would include depreciation expense on your capital assets, any allowance on accounts receivable, and all those inputs that go into calculating your net pension liability and your other post-employment benefit, which are very large liabilities. And we assess those and deem those all to be reasonable. Number 4, we were very happy to say there were no difficulties encountered during the audit. We did have a slightly different look and feel to the audit this year. We performed the audit entirely remotely, which began at the start of the pandemic in March. So again, we appreciate all the extra effort that the city went to make it successful. And again, appreciate all the work that Sandra and her team did to get us to a final conclusion. Number 5, we did not note any material misstatements. So the financial statements that were given to us were material in all respects, and there were no uncorrected misstatements. So that just points to the fact that the records are clean and that there are no systemic issues, and that they do a really good job handing us a clean set of books that are in all regards very easy to audit. And then number 6, we're also asked to communicate whether we had any material findings or other matters to note. Happy to say there were no material weaknesses and there were no other matters. There was one, what we call a significant deficiency, and it was in relation to capitalizing construction in progress. There was a spreadsheet that had a formula error in it, and it caused the ending balance to be off. So a smaller adjustment was made there, but other than that, everything was appropriate, and that was corrected in the financial statements that you received. Next slide, please. So very high level, the end of June 30th, 2020, the city had just over $100 million in assets compared to assets last year of just under 97 million. You'll see that They increased about $3.6 million over the year. A big change you'll see is in that net capital asset line item. That increased 1.6 million entity-wide, so both governmental and business type activities. And that was a result of capital asset additions in the governmental funds of about 3 million and $2 million in capital additions in your business type. And then obviously that decreases based on your depreciation expense, which you had about $3.5 million in depreciation expense over the year. So the net increase was 1.6 million. The other major differences were those deferred outflows related to your pension and OPEB, and those fluctuate based on the actuarial reports that you receive and those inputs that are put in your financial statements that we assessed and deemed those to be reasonable. If you go to the next slide. So total liabilities of the city at the end of the year, you had $173 million in liabilities, and that was a decrease from last year of 186 million, so a decrease of just under 13 million. You'll see your net pension liability increased just under $10 million, but your net OPEB liability decreased a significant amount by $26.8 million. And that was a result of significant changes in the difference between expected and actual experience and change in assumptions. There was a decrease from 8% down to 5%, and the discount rate that was applied was 3%. I know that's a lot of numbers and information, but that's what was calculated by the actuary and tested, and that was the expected OPEB liability at the end of the year. The other decrease you'll see is your long-term debt decrease from 33 million down from $36 million last year, so a decrease of 2.6 million. That was a result of a refunding and then just your annual debt payments in both the governmental and the business type activities. Next slide, please. So we talked about your assets and your liabilities, and then the remainder is your net position or your equity, and that's made up of three different buckets. Your unrestricted, which makes up about 71%. Your restricted makes up about 3%, and your net investment in capital assets makes up 26%. And you'll see that unrestricted is actually a negative 71%, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. Go ahead to the next slide. Okay, thank you. So those three different buckets that we talked about, that top line is your net investment in capital assets. So that went from $39 million last year to $44 million this year. Again, we talked about those capital asset additions that you added during the year, and that's what continues to increase that. That bottom line there are your restricted dollars. So those dollars that are brought in for specific purposes that have to be spent on those purposes, such as state and federal grants, that remain relatively stable from 5.9 million down just slightly to 5.7 million. If you go to the next slide, this is the unrestricted. That bottom line is your unrestricted negative. If you look at that bottom line, that actually went from negative 134 million to negative 122 million. Again, what causes that to be so large of a decrease or a negative is actually back in 2015 when pension liability was added onto your books, and then 2018 when the OPEB was added onto your books. That was a direct hit to your unrestricted equity. If you were to take out the effect of the net pension and net OPEB liability, that top line there would actually show you at a positive $8 million unrestricted balance. But because of the new accounting standards that brought those large liabilities onto the city's books, that continues to show you at a negative unrestricted balance at the end of the year of $122 million. So next slide. So this is a picture of your income statement. You'll see you went from $46.9 million in revenue last year to $149,000 this year. So a decrease, small decrease in revenue. As Sandra noted, those different factors related to COVID. You will see your expenses dropped off significantly from 52 million down to 29 million. what that significant decrease was that reduction in that net OPEB liability went down about $27 million. So if you were to take out the effect of that decrease in the OPEB liability, your expenses would be relatively similar, even probably slightly less than last year, around the $51 to $52 million mark. Next slide, please. And now to just talk briefly about your major revenue line items. So obviously the largest revenue source for the city was property taxes. And you'll see that trend over the last 3 years continues to see an increase in property tax revenue as the property tax values continue to increase. You were at $17.9 million in revenue at the end of this year compared to $17.7 million last year. And then the next slide shows your 3 other larger revenue line item sources. So that top line there is your intergovernmental or your state and federal dollars. That was just under $7.1 million at the end of this year compared to $7.2 million last year. So that dropped just slightly, but remained relatively consistent. That middle line, that light turquoise blue, you'll see it went from $2.5 million last year to $1.6 or $1.7 million this year, dropped significantly related to fines and forfeitures. And again, that's related to, again, what Sandra spoke to as far as the decrease in fines that were issued due to the COVID pandemic and folks staying home and off the roads. And then that last line are your charges for services. That went from 2.3 million down to 2.1. So a small decrease there, but that remained relatively flat over last year. Next slide. And now we'll just talk briefly about your general fund. You'll see your revenue for 2020, you were at 21,131,000. That was down slightly from last year of 21,864,000. In 2018 and 2019, your revenue exceeded your expenditures in both those years. This year, your expenses just slightly beat your revenue. Again, as Sandra had mentioned, you had a very small loss in the general fund of only $24,000. So I know that was budgeted to be much larger, but due to cost savings and such, that loss was dropped to only $24,000. Next slide. And then we like to talk about your general fund coverage ratio. So what this stands for is how much in your unspent or your unrestricted fund balance sits in your fund balance that could cover expenditures. So we compare that balance to your annual expenditures and then multiply that by number of months. So you're currently sitting at about 2.5 months of expenditures in your fund balance. And that has remained very stable over the last 3 years. It actually went up this year. So you went up from 2.35 months to 2.4. Again, that's increased just slightly the last 3 years. So again, a very positive trend there. And then lastly, we'll just move to the business type activities. So those things such as your water and sewer and your internal service. You'll see that very top line, your charges for services in your water and sewer went from 13.3 million up to 14.4 million. Again, a positive trend over the last 3 years. And then that internal service has remained relatively stable, just around the $1 to $2 million range. Next slide. And then we just like to talk about your business type activities as far as cash flow. So obviously they should be self-sustaining. And this just shows a trend of your cash flow, total cash flow for the water and sewer. The last 2 years, or I'm sorry, 2 out of the last 3 years, your water sewer had negative cash flow. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. And your internal service funds had negative cash flow only 1 out of the 3 years. So specifically operating cash flow, that top line talks about your business type, your water sewer. And if you are showing negative cash flow, then we like to talk about a couple of other factors that would point to that not being a potential problem. So your operating cash flow continues to be strong in your water and sewer. You were at $2.7 million in positive cash flow for operating activities compared to 3.1 last year. And your internal service funds have had positive cash flow over the last 3 years as well. And that's ranged from anywhere from a high this year of $710,000 to a low of $71,000 last year. And then finally, the cash balance of those funds has stayed relatively strong for your water and sewer. You're currently sitting at $2.6 million in cash at the end of the year for your water and sewer funds, down from $3.4 million last year. And your internal service funds cash has remained around the same and currently sits at about $432,000. And the last, I'll just speak briefly to upcoming accounting pronouncements. There are a lot coming up, but most of these will have little to no effect on the city's financial statements. You'll see GASB 87 is probably the only one on this slide that will have really any impact, if any, on your financial statements, and that relates to leases. So any leases that are currently as operating leases might be considered to be capital leases once that standard takes effect. And again, we'll work with the city to make sure that they're properly implementing that as we get closer. And then the final slide, GASB 84 was the GASB that was going to be effective for fiscal year 20, but that was delayed 1 year due to COVID, and that relates to your fiduciary activities and reviewing those and determining whether they needed to be transferred to special revenue funds. So that will be something that we look to for your escrow accounts, your payroll, and your tax fiduciary accounts, whether they need to be changed and transferred over to special revenue accounts. But we'll be working with the city this year to make sure that's properly implemented for your June 30th of 2021 statements. So with that, can I answer any questions?
Any questions from council on my small question? The cash balance for water and sewer went down. Can you explain the reason again, please? City Manager Tungate.
Daniel, can I explain part of the reason? And if you want to take that. Well,
yep.
Council members, first of all, it's a small miracle that we have a cash balance in water and sewer to begin with, because of what we've been through in water and sewer, having to pay out these lawsuits out of our fund balance. So that would be my take on why that's diminished somewhat. We've made, we've settled 2 lawsuits now. We've made payments out of the fund balance and some capital expenditures too that are required as part of the settlement of one of them. So we're carrying now that $2.5 million sitting in there might seem like a lot, but it's not where ideally a city of our size would want to be in our water and sewer fund. And it doesn't, for the foreseeable future, we're not going to be able to get to where we need to go because we can't raise rates to pay for these lawsuits. So for now, payments, one is coming off the books in 2 years, I believe, and the other one, we're just beginning the payment process. So for the foreseeable future, we're going to be stuck with this.
Just a reminder that if you start a class action lawsuit against your own city, it's like you're suing yourself.
Exactly.
Not fall for this again.
Right.
Yeah.
Madam Mayor, I do have a question.
Council member.
Just out of curiosity, so it seems like Oak Park's in pretty good shape, Daniel, and I'm just wondering what you're seeing in other cities. Are the trends similar when other cities were forced also by COVID to cut expenditures? Are you seeing trends that way as well, that people are ending up breaking even pretty much?
Yeah, so that is what most cities that we worked with really tried to do. Obviously, a big strategy was the furloughs and cutting costs across all funds. I know this only represents a very small portion of COVID. So, I mean, we're only looking at 3 months here because this is from middle of March through end of June. So obviously there's a lot more that COVID will affect in your next year financial statements than is even showing up here.
Councilmember Edgar, can I answer your part of your question as well? That's exactly right. And it's not so much, at least as of yet, it's not been so much on the expenditure side as it has been on the revenue side. And, you know, Daniel, the slide where, I don't know, recall what slide it was, but when you talk about fines and forfeitures, this is the one area where I am the most concerned, because this is where, you know, for whatever reason, you know, the protests, the pandemic, et cetera, we've seen a dramatic decrease in revenue associated with fines and forfeitures in our district court. This is the one area where I think you're going to see a tremendous hole post June 30, 2020 that we're going to need to fill. But again, this is why Kevin, Yee, and Sandra are going to be working together to come up with a real-time report, and we'll have to deal with it.
Thank you.
Sobering and more is to come, but the handling has been, it sounds like very well handled by the staff.
So far, so good. I mean, we are going to, assuming the pandemic ends this year, which it will, I hope, you know, we are going to be able to financially deal with the short-term negative effects of this. The question is, if it's sustained, then what? And really, if you go back to when the mayor and I came into office, really, it was the long-term effects of the real estate crash that really pummeled this city. That went on, and that is not like this. This is not a taxable value crash. That was a taxable value. The vast majority of our revenue was taken off the table. 40-some% of our taxable value was eliminated. This is different. But if it's sustained, if it goes on for, you know, 36 months beyond that, then I think we're going to be in trouble.
Erik, just on that note, are you seeing an increase in foreclosures in the city and an increase in the number of people appealing their tax assessments?
Yes, there's going to be, I mean, this was something we talked about, I think it was our last council meeting. And by the way, that's a great question. There's going to be not a 2008 type foreclosure crisis, but there is going to be a more minor foreclosure crisis. One example of that is we are going to be rolling out, we have about $1 million in unpaid water bills sitting out here right now. And we're going to be rolling quite a bit of those over to taxes eventually. As it plays out, a lot of these are landlord tenant issues, and for whatever reason, they're going to roll over to taxes, and you're going to see a smaller version of that foreclosure crisis. You're also, as Courtney and Ebony suggested at the last meeting, when we talked about this, you're also going to see on the commercial and corporate side of things, you're going to see way more appeals to the tax tribunal. And all that means is we're just going to be negotiating down taxable values, and away we go. Well, you add all of it up, and you know, you could see this possibly becoming a more sustained crisis. And that's notwithstanding, you know, I'm hopeful that we have a new Congress, we have a new president coming in. I'm hoping that there's a federal aid package to local and, you know, state form units of government, and that would be very helpful for us.
And the increase in our taxable property, and our property values, so it looked kind of modest, right? I mean, we're on the upswing, but we need to do better.
Well, let me just give you my 2 cents on that. I mean, I think 19 to 20 was somewhat modest. You're looking, I think it was a $400,000 or so increase in revenue. But the year 18 to 19 was $1 million jump in revenue from taxable value increases, which is not modest, major increase. And what does this say? Well, yeah, the city is recovering very well from the Great Recession, but also Kim and her team's doing a great job of attracting new businesses. We have FedEx online fully. FedEx, by the way, you're going to see the full impact of FedEx coming up in next year's budget because the brownfield has expired. So you're going to be seeing revenue associated with these economic development projects as well. Oak Park has, for the last, I think, couple of years now, has been right in the top 3 in Oakland County for market value percentage increases for residential. So you're going to see more of that become reflected in in overall taxable values as well.
Are there any further questions about budget questions for Daniel Clerk, our auditor, or city manager? Okay, I want to thank everyone associated with this mammoth task. Job well done. Bring us better news next year.
Madam Mayor, can I say one more thing? I'll be remiss if I didn't. I do think it's also important that two things. One, code enforcement and technical and planning are doing pretty well during this, which means we're not, negating those activities out here. So, I know it's been challenging with the pandemic, but our code officers and animal control officers are out here doing it, as well as our public safety officers. Also, it's not a bad thing that we've ended June 30, 2020, almost break even. I mean, I think we were $24,000 in arrears. We're almost break even. So if you had told me going into this that at the end of the fiscal year, we'd be about break even, I would have said, I'll take that deal, given the circumstances, without having to dip into our general fund balance that much. So I look at this as a positive. I don't think it's it's not like we've done in previous years, but given the situation, I think we did pretty well and did some really flexible, hard decisions were made to make that happen. Thank you.
If you don't want to be bored, come serve in city government. Never boring. Thank you very much to all concerned.
Thanks, Daniel.
Thank you very much.
And Daniel Clerk, and certainly Erik Tungate and the rest of the staff. Thank you. I have a little light communications that I would like to share. I received this typed letter. Mayor McClellan, City of Oak Park, 14,000 Oak Park Boulevard. Dear Mayor McClellan, my name is Benjamin Weston. I'm 10 years old. I live in Oak Park. I'm in the 5th grade at Ferndale Upper Elementary. I was assigned a project by my teacher, Mr. Williamson, called Lend a Big Hand. In this project, we had to perform a charitable act that would contribute to the common good. Sounds like a Martin Luther King Day boy. I decided to pick up trash in my neighborhood, create a more beautiful environment, protect wildlife, prevent litter from entering our storm drains and washing into our waterways. My mom and I made a plan to spend 4 Saturdays walking at least a mile each day and set a goal of collecting at least 100 pieces of trash. At the end of 4 Saturdays, we collected 576 pieces of trash. We received 10 thank yous from neighbors that we saw along the way. I'm going to continue picking up trash whenever my mom and I are out on walks. And I hope I can inspire others to do the same. We can all do our part to make Oak Park beautiful. And I'm writing to ask if you would bring attention to this issue, which we are doing right now by reading your letter. Maybe when it's safe again, we could have a city cleanup day and encourage others to join us in keeping Oak Park beautiful too. Thank you for your time. Signed, Ben Weston. Ben, I think, we ought to make you an honorary member of the Recycling and Environmentally Sound Commission. Councilmember Edgar probably would concur with that. We're delighted with your service and your idea and your teacher, Mr. Williamson. If you would give him some pluses also. And it sounds like we have a future member of Councilmember Whitehead's group down the road, don't you think? Thank you for your letter. Thank you for your service to the city. And we would love to inspire others to do the same. City Manager Tungate, we are at the city manager portion of our agenda right now.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. I would like to turn 14A over to my esteemed colleague, Assistant City Manager, Kevin Yee.
Thank you and good evening, everyone. Attached is a proposal from OHM Advisors to provide support to city staff in performing inspection, project management, and grant administration for work covered as part of the Safe Routes to School grant. Based off the traffic signal work that is routinely inspected by engineering staff, we have requested support from OHM Advisors field staff to assist with the inspection portion of the project. Assistance will also be required by OHM Advisors Office personnel to aid the city in paperwork required for the grant administration and reimbursement. There is $110,000 funding available in the Major Street Fund for this expense. It is recommended City Council approve the attached proposal from OHM Advisors to provide construction engineering services and grant administration for work covered under the Safe Routes to School grant, which amounts to a not to exceed amount of $82,875 upon review of the city attorney's office.
Thank you. And before we discuss this, can we have a motion to approve this proposal from OHM?
So moved.
Thank you, Council. Mayor Pro Tem Burns, is there a second?
Seconded.
Thank you, Councilmember Whitehead. Can you, Assistant City Manager Kevin Yee, can you describe the work again? This was brought up before, but just remind us of what work the Safe Routes to School is going to cover on 10 Mile Road.
Yes, absolutely. It's going to cover work on in several areas, actually, along 10 Mile Road and on Lincoln. Director Barrett has a quick presentation he could pop up that shows some of the work here. But in summary, there's going to be a traffic signal replacement at 10 Mile and Church Street, which is going to allow for a dedicated left turn phase for the 10 Mile Road traffic. That has kind of been an issue for us. There's going to be a pedestrian island in what's called the Hawk Signal at 10 Mile at Riverside Street. There's also going to be a rapid flashing.
Can you explain why that was decided to put there?
Well, we wanted to have safe crossings. We've actually had some pedestrians hit, and we wanted to provide some safe crossing areas in the city. We did extensive walkthroughs, even with the city manager and public safety director, and walked through this section, and we tried to find the best areas for pedestrians to cross where there's not conflicts with driveways and other streets and things like that. So this was the best location to provide this. And like I said, it was done with a lot of research and studies, and we actually hopped on a bus and went out here and took a look around. So we did some pretty extensive studies of this area.
Thank you.
And then there's also going to be what's called a rapid flashing beacon at Lincoln and Marlowe, which is shown on the bottom right there, where there's going to be some pedestrian signals and a operator that would, flash so to allow people to realize that there's pedestrian crossing there. There's also going to be a lot of work with sidewalk ramps and things like that in this kind of whole area here, where they're going to be doing. Here's a list of them, but they're going to be doing the ADA compliance with the grade, as far as making it grade compliant, and also having the truncated domes at the ramps.
What is a truncated dome?
It's the red thing you see in the picture there. It's the bumps, so that someone that's visually impaired can know when they're entering a street.
So there's going to be 12 of these added.
Well, there's going to be that's 12 intersections. Each intersection is going to have 4 legs of the intersection. So we're talking about 48. I believe there's 48 ramps, but some of them may be 3 ways. There's going to be a lot of ramps covered. Let me just put it that way. A lot of ramps covered. We're going to make ADA compliant. And
Madam Mayor, when you had a couple of meetings ago, I think it was you that inquired about these other improvements in that general area. Those are what you were referring to, because we saw that in a previous presentation. So all that stuff that he just showed was what you were asking about.
Right.
And, Joe Jenkins, our assistant city engineer, is going to be leading up the project. And we're going to be doing some of the inspection ourselves. But a lot of, especially when you deal with federal grants, a lot of the grant administration is complicated. And, OHM Advisors is going to provide a lot of that and some additional help on some of the inspection of actually the installation of the traffic signals and things like that. So we're going to be doing it, some of it in-house and, getting some assistance.
I think this has been something that we've needed for a very long time, and I'm delighted to see it is coming to fruition.
Yep, and I would like to give Director Barrett a lot of credit for that too. He worked through the grant process, and it's very cumbersome and a lot of work, and he put a lot into it.
Thank you to all involved. We want to make it safer. We want to make our streets more pedestrian friendly and bike friendly. And this is another step in that direction. It always amazes me that we're able to do this during these kind of times, to make these improvements now. I think that puts us on B.
And Mayor, we need to make a vote.
We need a vote. Sorry. Questions from the council. Moving ahead too fast.
Mayor McClellan, I do have a question about
Councilmember Edgar.
just about these projects in general and how they're chosen. I think these are great, and I'm really happy that, particularly at Lincoln and Marlowe, I think it's necessary, but there are other real trouble spots in our community. And I'm just wondering how we choose these particular areas. I mean, I think one of the more dangerous areas is southbound Greenfield, just south of Lincoln. People walk across, they're not coming down to the intersection to cross over to Southfield. So there's a bus stop, there's a bus shelter near Eddie's Gourmet, and people are always walking across, running to the island, and it's really frightening because traffic is moving fast. I think a pedestrian crossing would be perfect there. How many can we do? How did you choose these ones?
Well, this was chosen based on accident history that we've received. So we did have, like I said, a pedestrian hit here, and not in the very recent past. And we did actually look at some areas on Greenfield. You can't just put up a pedestrian crossing, I guess, midway, especially on a boulevard section like Greenfield. And in that area, there's traffic signals fairly often. I mean, there's a traffic signals, I think where you're referring to, both just north and just south of that area. But I also want to point out that Greenfield Road is a county road. It is not under Oak Park's jurisdiction. It also is, half in Southfield. So, not that the road commission wouldn't entertain an issue there, but they look at their areas too and determine what sections there are. But in the area you're referring to, if memory serves me, there's a crosswalk and signal, very short distance from that location, and you can't put one everywhere. Unfortunately.
At one point, I think maybe Director Barrett was speaking to this at one point, but I know at one point we had talked about improving the Greenfield and 10-mile pedestrian.
And we did review that area. I can't hear you, Director Barrett. I know you're not muted, but your volume isn't coming in.
There is a portion of Greenfield and 10 Mile that is being covered in this grant.
That's what I thought, but I didn't see it in the presentation. That's why I didn't want to say. I was going to look into it a little more, but it's not the area in particular that Councilmember Edgar is referring to, but there is a section of improvements at the 10-mile intersection. And I remember we did review that area and walk it.
Kevin, one more thing too, I would just have you add, the safe routes criteria that the state puts out there. I mean, it has to meet that criteria, whatever that is, right?
You are absolutely correct. It does have to correspond with crossings that are related to where school children are going. So they do actually look at that. We have to coordinate with schools that they have to say so many of their kids are crossing that area and using that area. It is direct correlation with the schools. When we went on that bus trip, or the trip out there, it was with the schools as well. So there's a lot of coordination that goes with it, and it does have to serve the specific need.
And you're right. I mean, there are crosswalks there, but they're not really used. It is really dangerous. I mean, I've come so close to hitting somebody I didn't see crossing over, because they're not walking to the lights, obviously. But there
Right.
is a school in Southfield right at Lincoln and Greenfield. So there are lots of students crossing, and it's really frightening.
But at Lincoln and Greenfield, there is a crosswalk.
Right,
You
but
know,
it's
so there
still,
is a crosswalk. So, and there has to be, again, logical places to cross. We walked this and we went through and we looked at places where you would cross, and safe places where you would cross. So I'm not sure that would be eligible. I mean, that's not something, something we can take a look at, but it seems to me, I know the area you're talking about, it seems like there's crosswalks and signals within a quarter mile in either direction, or less than a quarter mile probably from either direction of that. But we'll take a look.
thanks.
Madam Mayor, can I further comment?
Yes, please.
Just to further accentuate Kevin's statement there is that our Safe Routes to School grant was applied for with both the yeshiva schools right there at 10 Mile and Church. So this grant was specific to getting the kids safe to those two schools.
Are we ready for a vote then? Roll call, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Burns,
Yes.
Councilmember Edgar.
Yes.
Mayor McClellan,
Yes.
Councilmember Radner,
Yes.
and Councilmember Whitehead.
Yes.
Okay, unanimous then. Thank you.
Assistant City Manager Yi, 14B, please.
Yes, attached is a request from Inland Waters Pollution Control for a contract extension for the 2020 sewer lining contract M703. Inland Water Pollution Control has indicated they would like to execute the one-year extension on their unit prices from this project to perform the 2021 sewer lining contract M717. The contract does allow for a one-year extension. This project will rehabilitate deteriorated sewer mains throughout the project area. There is $300,000 funding in the Water and Sewer Fund for these expenditures. It is recommended City Council approve the offer for the contract extension from Inland Waters Pollution Control, Inc. for the 2021 sewer lining contract M717 for the total amount of $289,267. Funding is available in the Water and Sewer Fund.
So moved.
Before we just, who said so moved? Is that Radner? Thank you.
Yeah.
You was quick.
Second.
Second. Thank you. Burns, thank you. Discussion or questions? Obviously, we're happy with their work. We're extending their contract.
Correct. They've done a good job.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Edgar,
Yes.
Mayor McClellan,
Yes.
Councilmember Radner,
Yes.
Councilmember Whitehead,
Yes.
and Mayor Pro Tem Burns.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously. Thank you.
Okay, 14C, Director Kimberly Maroney, please. Oh, you're on mute, Kim.
My apologies. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, and City Council members. The department has been working with Union Joints to assist them with their development of the WWJ building on 8 Mile into a destination restaurant and event space. In 2019, we received a $600,000 grant from Eagle that we are administering. Now that Eagle has approved the final work plan, they are ready to go to work on the cleanup activities. Union Joints has identified Applied Environmental as its designated agent to complete eligible grant contract activities at the property for cleanup. As the administrator of the grant, the city will prepare quarterly reports once it receives invoices and paid receipts for activities eligible for reimbursement under the grant. Next, Eagle will send the amount to the City of Oak Park as the administrator, which in turn will then reimburse union joints or will pay such funds directly to Applied Environmental pursuant to the terms of the grant contract. Since COVID-19, the restaurant business has been hit especially hard. While the group would like to continue with their efforts, their shrinking cash flow with the shutdowns have been an obstacle. We are asking City Council to allow us to enter into an agreement with them so that we can pay for the approved reimbursable environment costs directly instead of how we were previously operating. This type of agreement has worked well in other communities such as Grand Traverse and acceptable to Eagle. The agreement has also been vetted through our city attorney's office.
Okay, is there a motion to request, a request to authorize the city manager? Okay, Mayor Pro Tem. is there-
Second.
Thank you, Solomon Radner. Discussion or questions?
Mayor McClellan, if I may. Kim, how does this work exactly? So with the grant, I'm just having trouble sort of picturing how this all works.
So currently the grant is run as us as the administrator. Union joints would pay for any eligible costs each quarter and submit the reimbursement request to us. We would get the check from Eagle and then reimburse union joints. Essentially what this agreement will do is eliminate them paying those costs up front, and we will get reimbursed directly from Eagle and then pay for the services that were rendered in each quarter. So it helps them with their cash flow, that they're not expending these expenses for the cleanup and then waiting for our reimbursement. We're just paying for those expenses directly once we receive the payment from Eagle.
And will that 600,000 cover the cleanup costs on that site?
Yes, it should.
What was it polluted with, by the way? I know it was a radio station or TV station.
Yes, so the previous owner cut the electricity to the building and the transformers were in the basement. The basement eventually had a sump pump backup and the basement flooded, which blew up the transformer and released chemicals into it, then contaminating the walls of the facility and some of the ground surrounding it.
It's a beautiful building, and I'm really looking forward to this. I remember them talking about this restaurant years ago.
What year did this exactly start?
Oh,
Came to our council
I
meeting
think
with
it
this
might have been
wonderful.
2016.
I think it was 2016, correct?
Fingers crossed, toes crossed, everything.
My last discussion is they are still moving forward. They're hopeful things will open up soon and they can continue the work on all the projects they have in place.
I'll invite you to have the first drink with me.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you. We need a vote. If there's no further question, we can vote.
Mayor McClellan,
Yes.
Councilmember Radner,
Yes.
Councilmember Whitehead,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Burns,
Yes.
Councilmember Edgar.
Yes.
Approved unanimously. Thank you.
Okay, 14D, Director Maroney.
Thank you, Erik. One project we've been diligently working on is trying to help our Oak Park businesses during this trying times. We've come to you in the past with previous business packages. We did our phase 1 and our phase 2 to try and assist them. Tonight, I'm coming to you with our phase 3 resolution. Essentially, what that is going to do is extend some of the deadlines that we had in place prior to continue assisting these businesses. Those two items are continuing to waive the $150 outdoor dining permit fee until April 30th, 2021, and then also allowing businesses to display an additional 32 square foot banner without a permit until April 30th, 2021.
Is there a motion in support of this part 3 of the business plan?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, thank you. That's Burns and Whitehead. Discussion? Let's see. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Radner,
Yes.
Councilmember Whitehead,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Burns,
Yes.
Councilmember Edgar,
Yes.
Mayor McClellan.
Yes. Approved unanimously. Thank you.
Good job, Kim. And last but not least, in the city manager's report, I have Director Davis. I feel like it's been forever since we've seen you in person.
It has been. Thank you, City Manager Tungate. And good evening, Madam Mayor and members of council and my good colleagues. There are several wonderful things happening this month and end of this month and beginning of next month. The first thing is there's an Oakland County Michigan Works virtual multi-industry career fair that's taking place on January 26th from 1 to 4 p.m. This is a great event where we're looking to help those who are looking for employment as well as employers looking for qualified employees. This is a virtual event and needs to have pre-registration. So there are two places you can look for this information. One is on our website. On the home page, there is a posting up that has the website that you can click on and you can register there. Also, on our Facebook page, we have an event. So there are two ways to get to that. You can either type in events on Facebook. You don't have to go into any page, just type in events and look for Virtual Career Fair Oakland County. Or on our page, on our Facebook page, we also have an event there as well. So either way, and there's another link there so you can ask questions about what employers would be there, things like that. The second thing is Henry Ford Health System is actually offering free COVID-19 testing across the street from City Hall at the Oak Park High School. They do this on Wednesdays from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. through March 31st. So they're free COVID testing. If you need more information about that, you can visit www.henryford.com/free COVID test, or you can call 313-876-1363. This is also on our Facebook page, the City of Oak Park's Facebook page, so you can get that information. There was a request, I believe, Mayor McClellan, you might have talked about this last time, for gun safety training for those residents who are interested. I have spoken with public safety, and they will begin planning a program for residents once the pandemic shuts down.
That's wonderful.
It is
fast work. Thank you.
It is. Boards and commissions. This is another great way to serve the community, serve Oak Park. Board and commission opportunities do exist right now. We have some openings, and our deadline for applications is January 29th. For those who don't know, boards and commissions are extensions of the council, or they serve at the pleasure of council, and they're all types of different commissions, from arts and culture to library board. There's so many. So it would be a good idea to look at the website for Oak Park and go under City Clerk and then Boards and Commissions, and you'll find that there are several openings right now and applications are welcome. Some of those that are vacant right now are, there's a libraries board seats that are open, Arts and Cultural Diversity Commission, the Corridor Improvement Authority, the Traffic Safety Board, and the Zoning Board of Appeals. There are vacancies there, so please do, if you're interested in serving your community, go in and fill out an application. There is a great program coming up called Ask the Attorney on February 3rd from 6 to 8 p.m. Our own city council member, Shaun Whitehead, will be the guest that day. Registration is required because there's limited space, and you should call the library if you have an interest in that. The number there is 248-691-7480. You can also visit our website and look at the library page, and there is a banner at the top. You can get the number from there as well. Now, for just a few things that are happening in recreation, we always have fantastic events happening with recreation and the library. Here are just a few. Find the Magic Scavenger Hunt. We talked about this 2 weeks ago, and it is still, there's still time for you to register for this. And in fact, we encourage you because it's such a great program. This is where we're inviting families to do a scavenger hunt around town. It does not require that you go into places. You're looking for special stars in the parks and on building fronts. And there are wonderful prizes for the first few families that actually do find all of the scavenger items. We have some family passes to the zoo, to the Detroit Zoo, which is fantastic. And we have to give a special thank you to our sponsor for this, which is Joyful Tots Child Care and Learning Center. They're sponsoring that event. We have a few virtual trivia nights coming up. Those are really fun, right? This is where we do, there's a cost for this. It's $5 per team, but we have prizes for this. We're going to have shows like The Office and Game of Thrones and Hunger Games and the Disney movies. In order to find out more about this, you should definitely visit the Facebook page for recreation or you can call the Recreation Department directly at 248-691-7555. The one that's coming up the quickest here is on January 21st. So that is in 2 days at 7 p.m. That'll be a trivia night on The Office, the show The Office. There's also a visual arts and crafts class for ages 6 to 12. It will be virtual, starting on January 26th at 5 p.m. It's 1 day. The cost is $10, and there are supplies provided, but you do have to come and pick them up from the community center. Also, Recreation Department is starting a teen council. This is monthly virtual meetings for teens. That begins on January 25th, starting at 4 p.m. Again, those interested should call directly to the Recreation Department for more information. Recreation is also sponsoring an online CPR class on February the 1st. Virtual sports camp for kids ages 6 to 17 is free. This is for basketball and baseball, and that's starting here pretty soon. So please, again, give a call to 248-691-7555. We have a few more things that are great for our sports lovers out there. One is a virtual esports, Rocket League, which is cross-platform. This is for ages 10 to 17. That's from February through April, and it's an 8-week program starting soon. Also, ESPN Fantasy Basketball League. This is virtual as well. The enrollment deadline is February 4th for this one, so please do call. It's only a $5 entry fee. The registration deadline is coming. You should still call. The draft date is actually in 2 days. For our seniors, we have just a few special things as well. First, we have Monday mornings with Marilee. Marilee is our senior services coordinator, and she's wonderful with our most precious population, our seniors here in Oak Park. January 25th from 10 to 10:30, there is a virtual call that will happen. Please do call the recreation office so that you can get the Zoom or phone access code and call in. We also have this program called Train Your Brain, Brain Booster Activity Packets. They're packets we give out that have games in them and ways for you to keep your brain active. And we've started to pass them out January 20th. That's tomorrow through March the 10th. And that's sponsored by our good friends at Humana. We have a senior bingo. We've been playing this before. This is a lot of fun, and you play it in your car so that we can socially distance. That is on Monday, January 25th from 11:30 to 12:30 in the community center parking lot. And then finally, Winter Bliss, the senior comfort package is coming up. That's January 28th, and that's free. That's where we provide comfort packages that include activities to promote a feeling of well-being for our seniors. And that's sponsored from our good friends at Smart. I just want to also remind everyone who's listening that we are still doing business, although the municipal complex is closed to the public through February 1st, opening February 2nd at this point. We are still doing business. All of us are still working. We're either remotely or we're working very safely in waves in the office. So you can still get your business done. And if you need to speak with someone from a department, don't forget to go to the website, look under departments, and the telephone numbers are all there. Also email addresses if you'd rather do it that way. I'd also encourage everyone to stay connected with us, stay connected with the city, and there's several ways you can do that. The easiest way is for you to go to our webpage, our main page of the website, and you'll see a pop-up box come up that says, do sign up for emergency and also any kind of e-blasts from us. If you put your email address in there, we'll be sending you all kinds of great information like the mayor's monthly message, which she does on the 15th of every month, and people seem to love it, so you want that. Also, we send out emergency information. Maybe it's about snow plowing or about leaf pickup, other things like that. You'll also be enrolled for robocalling. That's going to be really important, especially if we have a snowstorm or something and we need to let you know to get your cars off of the street or something of that nature. So it's great for you to sign up there. And you can get regular information by going to our website and also liking us on Facebook. And by the way, we have several pages, not just City of Oak Park. We have a recreation page, a library page, a 9-mile redesign page, as well as our farmers market, when we do have a farmers market. Also on the 21st of every month, the Recreation Department will be putting out 2 short newsletters, and they are physical newsletters that you can pick up right on the inside of the doors without having to see anyone. They'll be right in a mailbox. One's called the Senior Scoop, and that's for our senior population. Sometimes our events change, and we want to make sure that you know what's the most up-to-date information. And the other is the Rec, and that's more for families and also some of our sports programs. So on the 21st of every month, you're able to pick that up right in the doorway. That's all I have. I just wanted to have one more thing here, City Manager Tungate, and I wanted to give a special shout out to Benny White, our videographer. He actually withstood the cold and went out to that wonderful peace walk, MLK Day peace walk on Monday, and he gave some wonderful footage, put wonderful footage and photos on our Facebook page. So if you have a chance, please take a look, because even though we're socially distancing, we still made that walk, and Oak Park usually makes a big splash. They make a big appearance in that walk. So that's it. Thank you so much, City Manager Tungate. If there are any questions, I'm available for that.
One more thing, council members, as part of the city manager report, and it's a perfect segue. Thank you, Jocelyn. At the next council meeting, council members, I intend to bring another recommendation to you regarding our closure to the public. So as Jocelyn mentioned, right now, we're planning on reopening to the public on February 2nd. That is subject to change. We have our council meeting on February 1st, and that could change. That being said, Madam Mayor, members of council, that completes the city manager report for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, City Manager, and all your staff for amazing work. We are now at the audience portion, call to the audience. Director Vecchio, do you have any audience members who would like to speak?
If anybody would like to speak at this moment, please raise your hand on the participants list or leave a message in our chat and we will call on you. I'll give it just a minute here. Madam Mayor, I don't see anyone that wishes to speak.
Thank you. Next, we have call to the council. I only have one item. Today, we had the first of 5 workshops. The members of the Corridor Improvement Authority Board attended the first workshop. It's a Main Street workshop led by very competent Matthew Wagner on the best response to save our businesses from the COVID. And it was mentioned that some of our small businesses are not online and need to learn how to embrace e-commerce. Some restaurants are considering adding outdoor dining. Marketing has to improve. People aren't checking email. And just evaluating what our issues are specific to Oak Park, and then coming up with some solutions to help our small businesses. So the members of the Corridor Improvement Authority Board are doing their regular monthly meetings plus these 5 extra hourly meetings. And thanks to Director Maroney for setting this up for us to save our businesses. Mayor Pro Tem Burns.
Thank you, everyone, for coming out and witnessing our city council meeting. I'd like to say thank you for all of the hard work that our accounting firm, our auditing firm went into to present us with an update. I also like to thank Colton and his team for our presentation earlier today. Everyone stay safe. Please continue to wear your mask and practice social distancing. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Radner.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. Councilmember Whitehead.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just want to say yesterday was would have been 92nd birthday for Dr. King. Just hopefully we all can keep honoring him. And it wasn't a day off, it's a day to take on. And I think we got a lot more things to take on the citywide, nationwide, statewide. So let's do that and keep it short tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. And we are here on Tuesday because of Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. And the book he wrote about, are we going to community or chaos? It was written many years ago, but it's a good question for right now. And I challenge all of us to move toward community. Thank you and good night.
Did you forget about
Didn't you forget somebody?
What did I forget?
Councilmember Edgar?
Oh, did we lose you? Yes. Yeah, I always have to forget somebody. Member Edgar.
Oh, I just also wanted to thank Courtney Krause for a really good presentation on what could be if we adopt a marijuana ordinance. I'd been looking into it myself and I could not wrap my head around it because it's just so sprawling. So thank you for that. And I wanted to also thank Sandra Crawford and City Manager Tungate for your stewardship of city finances. We seem to be in good shape, and I think that's a wonderful thing. It's no small thing. And I also want to commend Parks and Rec for bringing together some really fun, creative programming. I think the bingo in the parking lot Monday should be kind of interesting. I hope somebody's there to take pictures. I don't know how they're going to manage it, but it sounds fun. And I'm glad that they started Teen Council because it's really something that we need to do. We've got the Oakland County, the Oak Park Youth Assistance Board, and they've been working towards this, and it's really important that we engage our teens. So very happy about it. And good night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you. Now we can really adjourn. Thank you so much.
Good night.
Good
Night.
night.